Now to some very interesting recommendations coming out of the United States. Now, what if asymptomatic COVID-19 patients only had to isolate for 10 days and not the globally recommended 14 days? What if after those 10 days, a patient who only had mild symptoms could simply leave isolation without the burden of having to do further tests? Well, according to recommendations presented by America's Center for Disease Control and Prevention in an updated report, this would limit unnecessary prolonged isolation and the unnecessary use of laboratory testing resources. But as Waihiga Mwaura tells us, those recommendations are based on the best information available as at mid-July 2020 and could be overturned with the changing nature of the coronavirus pandemic.
The report, titled Duration of Isolation and Precautions for Adults with COVID-19 and updated on the Center for Disease Control and Prevention website on the 22nd of July 2020, states that using a symptom-based strategy rather than a test-based strategy could lead to the earlier ending of isolation and precautions for persons with COVID-19. In its assessment, and I quote, available data indicates that persons with mild to moderate COVID-19 remain infectious no longer than 10 days after symptom onset, end quote. And this report thus recommends the following, and I quote, isolation and precautions can generally be discontinued 10 days after symptom onset and resolution of fever for at least 24 hours without the use of fever-reducing medications and with improvement of other symptoms, end quote.
But for us here in Kenya, we need to look at the people who have been tested so far in our isolation centers and in our home-based care program to see whether it makes sense to release people at 10 days without testing, because we know you can actually release people at 14 days if they have no symptoms without testing. So we cannot say for sure right now it is safe to release people at 10 days because I've not seen the current data on our patients to see if people being tested at 10 days, how many of them are still expressing the virus in their airway. So if our data supports that, it could be adopted, but we've not seen it.
With some COVID-19 patients in Kenya lamenting that they were kept in isolation longer than usual because their tests remained positive, even in the absence of symptoms, this report could have answers for them. The report states that, and I quote, for persons recovered from SARS-CoV-2 infection, a positive PCR during the 90 days after illness onset more likely represents persistent shedding of the viral RNA rather than reinfection. It gives the following recommendation: for persons previously diagnosed with symptomatic COVID-19 who remain asymptomatic after recovery, retesting is not recommended within 3 months after the date of symptom onset for the initial COVID-19 infection, end quote. The CDC also seems to assume that those previously infected have gained some form of immunity when they state that, and I quote, in addition, quarantine is not recommended in the event of close contact with an infected person, end quote.
It's a sensible recommendation that for people who have recovered, if they get exposed, they may not need to go under quarantine because we expect them to have some residual protection, but only for a few weeks. And this has been estimated to be 3 months because of what we know about other coronaviruses that are similar to COVID-19. But this is information that can change as we get more information. As we get more information on the virus, so we should keep collecting information and data so that we can understand better whether people could get infected. I don't think that question has been answered yet. We still have that question out there.
The test-based strategy versus symptoms-based strategy could be a key talking point in the days to come. But even for viruses for which many years of data are available, it may not be possible to establish recommendations that cover 100% of those who may have been affected. Waihiga Mwaura, Citizen TV.